Okay, go.
Okay. We're at the Green Library, Ray and I. Ray, of course, producer, director, and the man running the camera. Also a military veteran, the same way I am. Great to see you folks here. Our show is Ghost Airplanes. And I want to tell you now, it's a bumpy ride, so fasten your seatbelts. Okay? And remember now, folks, I'm the messenger. Only the messenger about this stuff. I'm just sending the messages out. Now this airplane right here, the Grumman Mallard off to the right, big beautiful airplane. Well, I own that airplane. I have it in storage. Well, not exactly storage, it's the bottom of Lake Erie. But I call it in storage. And a friend of mine gave me the airplane without telling me where it was. And I knew this guy, when he tells you about he's going to give you an airplane or something free, there's got to be a catch to it. Well, it turned out that the airplane, he bought the airplane. Well, I'll get on with the story, then we'll get to that. Okay, this Grumman Mallard was built 1946 to 1951. And it's a big, beautiful airplane, as you can see, amphibious. And there was General Tire owned one. And General Tire used it as a corporate aircraft. And the pilot was a guy by the name of Ted Migdal, the chief pilot. He's from our neighborhood. And the odd part, nobody could figure out why he got into the mess he got into, was that he was a Navy instructor on amphibious airplanes like this, even the ones that are much bigger. They built 78 of those. And then they turned over, when the military wanted the bigger one, they came out with the same airplane but extended. And many of you military guys would know that it's the Albatross. And it was used by the Air Force and the Coast Guard for air-sea rescue. They built many, many of them, but the Mallard was never built again. So it was used all over 78 of them all over the world. And General Tire bought this. And the price new in '46 was $115,000. And I saw one for sale in one of the aviation papers for $1,680,000. There's, I think, 43 left flying. And there's 33 or so in the United States. Anyway, let's get back to General Tire. This was their corporate airplane for the executives. It came off the line at 17 seats, but General Tire had it converted to 12. It was an executive version. All their executives are out. And it was a July the 1st, beautiful day in July. He got a call from some of the two executives in Toronto, and they wanted to be picked up. Well, his co-pilot was flying another trip. So a neighbor kid had a commercial license, so Ted knew him, got him to go as co-pilot to fill a warm body, just to fill their insurance requirements. So they took off, they're heading for Toronto in a northeast direction, got 5 miles out over the lake, and then Ted never admitted this, but everybody thinks that he was trying to show the kid, giving him a little instruction, show him a water landing. Well, there 15 or 20 witnesses saw the whole thing. And they were...
You're going through the slides.
Okay.
Go back.
I think you're accidentally hit
I hit the wrong one, huh?
Yeah,
No, go backwards.
go back.
Yeah.
Hit the backwards button.
Back.
Oh,
The other way.
Okay, I got the wrong one.
There you go.
Okay, now,
Go ahead and talk while he gets the picture
Yeah.
back.
yeah,
It's this.
I should have brought my glasses.
Yeah. Now you got out of it, and I don't know how to get back to it.
Just keep hitting the other button.
Anyway, you want me to keep on talking anyway? Okay. And he attempted a landing, and in the FAA investigation, it came out that he probably was teaching this kid. and they had swells. Now, Lake Erie is notorious for that. And they had swells 3 to 4 feet. And in amphibious airplanes, you land along the swell, not into it. Well, when he came in, he caught the right pontoon. And so he jammed the throttles forward to pull out of it, pulled the airplane up, and then the wing stalled because there wasn't any lift anymore. So he banged back in level position, and the nose gear door collapsed, and the airplane filled with water, filled real fast with water. It lasted 15 minutes, then it sunk to the bottom at a flying position, level position. And Ted and the co-pilot got out, but the kid had a friend of his ride along. And Migdal said, yeah, okay, we're only picking up 2 people. So his friend from college could not get out of the airplane. So he was, yeah, so you can imagine he's beating his way out of the airplane and he's trapped in there. And the airplane sunk, and the Coast Guard spent maybe a week to 10 days searching for the airplane. Of course, his body's in the airplane. They could not find the airplane. They had dragged it, they had sonar, everything. And we have a search area here on this, and it was, to me, it was puzzling why they searched so much to the southeast. When the airplane was heading northeast, or rather to the southwest, the airplane heading to the northeast, and that's where it went down off the Lake Erie. And the Lake Erie currents, if they said it would carry anywhere, I thought it would carry out into the lake itself. But from then on, that airplane has disappeared and gone. Well, a friend of mine, a salvage dealer, bought the airplane from General Tire for $2,500. And he tried everything he could. Sonars, everything. He's an expert in salvage, became a millionaire doing it. And then finally, when he was just about on his deathbed, he called me up and asked me if I wanted an airplane. And knowing this guy, but then it was something, well, yeah, sure, why not? I've never owned an airplane at the bottom of Lake Erie. So that's where it is somewhere. And I'm going to get back to the ghost part of that and when get into the 401, the Flight 401, the big Lockheed 1011 owned by Eastern Airlines. 401 left December 29, 1972. It left JFK in New York, bound for Miami. Had 167 people aboard. 95 survived. But what happened here, and Tim being an airline captain over here, would know about this. What happens when things get mixed up in a cockpit. Cockpit resource management, Tim, that's what they teach after that accident. But there are 3 people, a captain, co-pilot, and a flight engineer. Between them, they had little over 50,000 flying hours. So they're on their way to Miami. They talk to the tower finally. They get clearance for the approach. It's a clear night. They're approaching, and then captain gives the gear down sign. They put the gear down, get 2 green lights, not the nose wheel green light. Well, the first thing you always do when you have a bulb that does not light up indicating a gear, you take out that old bulb and transfer around to see if it's the bulb or if it's the airplane or the landing gear itself. Well, they couldn't get the bulb out. So everybody was concerned with trying to get this bulb out. And the captain immediately then put the airplane on autopilot, altitude hold at 2,000 feet. But what happened when he was talking to the flight engineer, he turned backwards and he leaned against the control column. Well, there's a mode B on that big airplane autopilot that if there's a slight pressure, then the captain then could use the autopilot, we could still hand fly the airplane. So what happened, it took it away from altitude hold, and the airplane started descending. Well, all they were doing was just trying to get that light bulb out. The captain was watching him. Here's a guy with about 31,000 hours. They were so concerned And nobody flew the airplane. Nobody watched their altitude descending very quietly. And the horn went off about loss of altitude, but the engineer, it only went off in his station. And he wasn't at his station. So the captain ordered the flight engineer to go down into the avionics bay, which was, so he lifted the door up, went down there, and the avionics bay is where all the avionics radio equipment was stored. And there's a porthole there about so big where he can look and see if the gear's down or not. Well, he got down in there. In the meantime, the airplane continued right down into the Everglades. It hit the Everglades at 227 miles an hour. 95 people survived, and if we can get the picture here, you got pictures of the accident. It was a there. Well, they're no good at airplane accidents, and they were a bad one. That was a bad one. And all these people survived, 95. 2 flight attendants were killed out of 10. So then one of the big problems they had was gas gangrene from the swamp water. And 8 people were immediately rushed to the hospital, and then they were treated, and they recovered. Well, there's some died but there's 8, I think, recovered from that gas gangrene caused by the bacteria in the swamp water. Then on, Eastern, being a penny pinching outfit, took a lot of parts that were salvageable from the downed airplane, gave it to Lockheed, made an agreement on the 1011s they had on the production line to use these parts. 3 airplanes, 1011s, got parts from the downed Flight 401. And then the fun started. I shouldn't say fun because it's macabre. The first flight, they took one new 1011 and put it on the same flight from New York, JFK, to Miami. And they titled it 401, same time, same everything. They're up, leveling off. The flight attendants are back there getting ready for the meals and all, and one of them starts to scream. She yells to the captain. They come running. The flight attendants come running. Some passengers in first class ran up. She pointed to the microwave, and there was a face in the microwave. And that was the face of Don Repo, who was the flight engineer. And immediately, then when they got down and told the story, nobody would fly the airplane. And Eastern, the executives at Eastern were mad about that. And they put out a directive, you don't talk about any ghosts or anything. Well, it leaked out to the press. The next flight on another airplane that had the parts from 401 in it, the next one, the captain went on, the flight engineer rather, went on early to do the pre-flight. And there's a guy in a uniform, Eastern uniform, sitting in his seat. And the man turns around, and it's the dead flight engineer, Don Repo. An apparition. And he said to him, no sense doing the pre-flight. I've done it. The airplane's safe. No 1011 will ever crash. We won't permit it. Then he disappeared. They documented that. The next one, on another airplane, was where the captain went into the cabin early, and there's a captain sitting in a seat. And he walks up to him, and the man never responded, and he said, oh my God, it's Bob Loft, the captain of the down 411, or 401 flight. He disappeared. Then there's a woman on another airplane, she was in first class, and she came back to the flight attendants, and she said, there's a man, a captain, sitting in first class, he's not on our roster. And he won't even talk to me, he just keeps staring straight ahead. So they said, this is the airplane. So this guy completely disappeared again. And this went on, and another, third airplane with the 401 parts in it was on its way from Atlanta to Mexico City. And they're up at altitude, everybody They had the autopilots on, they're flying along nice, and all of a sudden they hear a knocking, a banging, and what they called the hellhole, where the avionics bay was right down. So nobody, they'd heard these ghost stories, nobody would open that up. Finally, one guy yanked it open, and who's staring up at him with an apparition, the face of Don Repo, the flight engineer. Well, then nobody would fly. They would not fly any of these airplanes. They had another case where the flight engineer for that particular airplane was making a pre-flight, and he was going up the instruments, punching the buttons and all of a sudden a face appears in the instrument panel, and he panicked. He called captain over, he called the attendants, and they all signed statements that they saw the face of the dead flight engineer in the instrument panel. And then he was trying to say something. Finally they understood that he was saying, "Watch out for this airplane. There will be a fire. There may be a fire." So they landed, they had the airplane completely checked over, took off, heading back to Atlanta, got up to altitude, and all of a sudden, one of the engines started shooting flame out of it. And then it was intermittent, so they shut it down, returned to Mexico City, checked everything out. There's no trace of fire or anything. The engine was running perfect. They were warned about this. They made the statement, signed everything. A vice president from Eastern Airlines got on the airplane, boarded first into the first class. And the guy walks up or sits down, next to him is an airline captain. And he engaged in conversation. He said about 2 or 3 sentences, and the guy looked at him, and then he said, "Oh my God, it's Bob Loft, the captain of 401. And he disappeared just like that. Now, this is getting bad for Eastern Airlines. So Frank Borman, an ex-astronaut, was chairman of the board of Eastern Airlines. Well, he called it all garbage because of a lot of publicity. But then he put out a message to all employees: you talk about ghosts or anything, you're immediately fired. So they kept it quiet. There's another case where a woman got on first class, and she saw this captain sitting across from her, and she didn't like the way he looked. He looked sick, and she went back and told an attendant, and they came up, and the captain came up, and they said, "That's Bob Lott." Then he disappeared. So they're apparitions. Well, in the paranormal, which once again, I'm the messenger. I don't believe in this stuff up to a point, but there are things that happen we don't know about, right? You know, where you just don't know. Maybe another dimension, whatever, but that's not what I'm getting into. These happen. And the paranormal people believe that when a person, you have ghosts, haunted houses and all that, that generally whoever died in that house had a bad death. They were killed. And they're coming back. They don't believe they're dead because they refuse to believe they're dead. So they come back as an apparition. And airplane accidents are violent. And people don't want to die pilots don't want to die in an airplane accident. So what happens? There have been cases of sightings of apparitions for many, many airplanes around the world. Too many to even mention here. One museum down in, I think it's in Missouri, talks about apparitions walking around these World War II airplanes. So, once again, I'm just the messenger, okay? Don't shoot me. Okay, we're ready to click on again? Yeah, this is a big, beautiful airplane. But what happened, while all this was going on, Eastern secretly took the 3 airplanes out of service and removed all the parts from Flight 401. And they never had another incident of an apparition showing up on one of the airplanes. And now with my airplane, the Mallard, that I have in storage, the bottom of Lake Erie, that airplane now, there's something connected with that, but I'll get back to that. Just a second here when I finish with this. Also, they had an exorcism by 5 Eastern Airline captains who were ordained ministers. And they went around the airplane praying, and they got into the airplane, they held hands, they prayed, and they were telling him, you're dead, it's okay for you to leave, it's okay for you to go. Well, the one airplane then, for that airplane, an apparition never appeared again. So it's that these apparitions in the paranormal, whatever you call it, think that these people did not want to die and they don't believe they're dying. Their apparitions come back. Who knows? Now, let's get back to the mallard. A mallard, this young man, when they find, if they ever find that airplane, it's not a piece of that airplane has ever been found in the shallowest lake of the lakes, the Great Lakes. And this airplane, what happened to it? There's never been a one part found of it. So here, now let's stretch the story. This is a real stretch. I've added this. What if that young man who's trapped in there tried to get out of that airplane, his remains are still in that airplane, what if he's an apparition and does not want to believe he's dead? So when anybody gets close to finding the airplane, grappling or with sonar, he moves the airplane. Because if he's found, then he's going to be dead. Now, I added that to just give a little spice to your story here. Okay, let's take a look at, do you want to do that? I don't have my glasses, Ray.
Okay, this is to run it backwards.
Yeah, okay, yeah, let's take it forward again. Okay, there's that. Just take it back again.
Okay.
Yeah, one more time. Oh, there's the route right there. Okay, then to the back again. One more. Okay, there's what the 1011 looks like in landing configuration. And it hit, of course, the landing gear would take some of that, but at 227 miles an hour, that was a real bang when it hit the Everglades. Okay, now we can move on, Ray, to
Okay.
yeah, the next one.
Well, you wanted to get back.
Yeah, I guess let's go to the next one there. Okay.
Okay, here.
Okay, there, we can go start. This is the,
Yeah.
okay, I showed you that before. Okay,
Next one.
okay, there's it, it's in flight. Isn't that a beautiful airplane? If anybody could find that airplane, it would be worth a lot of money. Now, up in, during World War II, the Glenview Naval Air Station above Chicago, they were training Navy pilots. And many airplanes went into Lake Michigan. And the Navy finally has decided they're going to try to find them and refurbish them, whatever. When they pulled up an F-3F Hellcat, there's air in the tires, gas in the tanks, oil in the engine. They brought the airplane up, they cleaned it up, took it to Pensacola, and it's on display. They had the young ensign who was flying that airplane, they tracked him down. Unfortunately, he was terminally ill. But they flew him down to Pensacola so he could sit in that airplane, which was a touching story. Okay, when we go on again, this was the interior of that airplane. This is what the General Tire interior looked like. Executive, it's a plush airplane. Okay, here are the stories from the Beacon Journal. There's a couple of them. They're microfiche, or microfilm was not too great. There's Ted Migdal, and there's the young man who's lost. There is the route. And there's where the airplane went in, where the X is. And there's the search area. And I often wondered why they didn't search down in this area or whatever. But that was their program. The Coast Guard tried for quite a while to dragging, sonar, everything. They found nothing. They couldn't find a piece of that airplane. So once again, we make a stretch out of the story, and the guy's apparition is there. He doesn't want to be discovered. If he's discovered, then he realizes he's dead. So he's probably in that, I don't know what you call it in religion, but it's an in-between area between heaven and hell. where apparitions develop because they don't want to be recognized as being dead or told that they're dead. Okay, let's see what we got here now. Okay, now the last one was the P-40 story. Have you fellows ever heard of that? Okay, the P-40 story is, this is a wild one. When the Japanese invaded the Philippines, a bunch of pilots and mechanics and people went into the jungle in Mindanao, and they recovered some airplanes, and they made one good P-40 out of these parts. And the story, and my son emailed it to me. I looked at, well, I don't have it right here, but anyway, I had the P-40 flight manual with me here. They said, the story says that they built this airplane up, they put bamboo skids on it, more fuel tanks, and it took off heading for Pearl Harbor. Well, it was said that the Mindanao was only, 1,500 miles from Pearl Harbor. I knew that something's wrong because 5,300 miles. And even if this airplane did 300 miles an hour, that's 18 hours. And that Allison V1650 engine would probably be gulping about 54 to 60 gallons an hour, 300 miles an hour. He'd have to have 6,000 pounds of gas on it. And the airplane only weighed 6,500 pounds. So when you look at the flight manual, you uncovered a lot. I did that with the Amelia Earhart story because I owned an airplane, the Lockheed Electra, and her airplane was a Lockheed Electra. Mine was a Lockheed 12A, hers was a Lockheed 10. And the story, when you look at the flight manuals, we'll probably show that later on, but when you look at the flight manuals, you think some of these things are impossible. If you're going to sit down and try to fly it as a pilot, you're going to fly that. So anyway, going back to the P-40. The P-40 shows up in Hawaii, near Hickam Field. Well, this was a month after Pearl Harbor, supposedly. Then fighters scramble, they intercept the P-40, and it was all shot up. So they all slid right in, took a good look. The airplane, they couldn't understand how it was still flying. They looked at the cockpit, and the pilot was all bloody. And there was no landing gear hanging on, because if an airplane gets shot up like that, the hydraulic is gone. So the landing gear is going to fall out. There's nothing there. So the pilot waved at him, and then he fell forward onto the stick. The airplane dove in, supposedly about 1 mile from Hickam Air Base. The crash and rescue crews got there. They found nobody in the airplane. So obviously, apparition again, flying that airplane, supposedly. Well, then there's a guy by the name of Robert L. Scott. He was a colonel. He was with the Flying Tigers. You folks all know who the Flying Tigers are. They fought the Japanese as American volunteers. They flew the P-40s. And Colonel Robert Scott had 18 victories. And then he was also a writer. He wound up a general after he went into the Air Force. Then he retired a general. He recently died at the age of 97, maybe 2 years ago. Well, at the age of 92, he finally confessed to a confidant that, well, he wrote a bestseller, God is My Co-Pilot. Another one, Wings Over China. And so, and he wrote, when he retired, he wrote articles and stories, and he said that he had to confess it. He and his buddy, a major, so they're drinking a little bit, and they decided to make up a good story. So they made up this P-40 story, and Colonel Scott, at that time, thought it was such a great story, he sold it to a couple magazines. But from then on, it grew legs, as they say about stories, that every so often it pops up. The P-40, the Phantom P-40 with no pilot flying it, or a dead pilot flying it. Okay, how's our time going, Ray?
Okay. 15 minutes left.
15, okay.
About a half hour.
Okay, now, I've got a couple more. Let's see, let's go ahead.
Let's see if it'll bring up that picture.
It should be right at the end. Okay, there, wait, that's a good one right
Okay.
there.
Okay.
There's the flight attendants. Now, they were aboard the Flight 401. Two of those were killed. There's one young Hispanic gal was extremely nervous. It was her first flight out of flight attendant school. And what she thought, she was just afraid. The other girls comforted her and all. They told her to go see this gal who's real religious. She may help you out. So she went to see this woman in Miami. And the woman took one look at her, and she had a fearful look on her face. And she went, and this is a story told by the flight attendants. This woman went and got a crucifix. She gave it to this Hispanic gal, says, wear this when you're taking off and landing and flying in that airplane. You hold this crucifix. Nothing will ever happen to you. So before the flight out of New York in 401, she sat here. Another attendant, more experienced one, sat on the other side. Well, this one came over and asked her, said, "Will you get down to Miami?" She says, "I've always sat on the right side. I want to see the lights." So she switched. When the airplane crashed in Miami, this gal that took her seat was killed by heavy objects falling on her. The flight attendant, the young Hispanic gal, sitting in the right seat, an empty bin fell on her. She was trapped, but she was not even injured. She never flew again. And that's one of the flight attendant stories. Okay, this is what part of the crash looked like. That's an airplane crash. I've seen a good number of them, the military and in civilian life, and they are not pretty. There's part of the airplane right there. I don't know how they got anything out of it, but they did get a lot of salvageable small items, and the galley and all of that put in the other airplanes. There's the P-40. Now, this is actually a replica. They took an old P-40 at the, I believe this is Planes of Fame, or the used to be the Confederate Air Force. They restored it to flying condition, painted the airplane up, and then there's the 18 victories. So they dedicated this to Colonel Robert Scott. And they put the Tigers on it. Well, they got the name Flying Tigers. The Chinese people said the Tigers are flying for us against the Japanese. So that became the Flying Tigers then. But the Japanese myths were fearful of sharks. So every airplane that flew in the Asian area, the guys would paint these teeth on it. Even B-24s and B-17s had these shark teeth painted on it. And, well, we got some time, so a couple more. I've got two airplanes. I've had two airplanes and two experiences. Now, you can decide what happened on these. I'm not even going to try to come up with an answer to it. Number one was 1950, I was recalled into the Air Force during Korea. And I was flying in 52, I was flying from Akron to Boston to Hanscom Air Force Base. And I was going into the reserves up there, but then I had a pending job with Northeast Airlines, and I was going to train at Wiggins, their airline training program, and at Paxatunt Naval Base, where I was going to take the simulator training. So I stopped at Buffalo for gas. The weather was horrible. You had turbulence, stunned everything but a sandstorm. I gassed up in this single-engine airplane at Buffalo, took off, and on the way out about 150 feet or so, 150 feet, I lost power in the engine. Not all of it, I had a little bit. And then the airplane starts down. Well, I looked ahead of me and there's power lines. Well, if you hit power lines, you know what's going to happen. You're going to be a crispy critter. Immediately, the fuel will blow up right then and there. So I turned the airplane. I had time to turn the airplane, like this. Then I leveled off and I looked right at the house. And there's a woman there washing dishes at the kitchen sink. And when she saw me coming, her eyes, every time I tell the story, her eyes get bigger. And this woman was just frozen there. And I just was clear, now I can even see her there holding the dishes. And so now here is the mystery. I was getting close. You know, an airplane at 80 miles an hour, that's what it's coming down at, about 80 miles an hour. An airplane won't turn like here, turn that way, right? A car won't turn at 80 miles an hour. If it tries to turn at a 90-degree turn, it's going to tip over. So I've asked myself many times, who turned the airplane? I don't remember it. I was intent on holding my airspeed so I wouldn't stall out. But you know, you're trained, you're not going to panic or anything because you're trained for emergencies. And you're thinking as clear as you can. So who turned the airplane? 90-degree turn. You can't do it in a car at 80 miles an hour, you'd tip over. So I went in, I didn't try to do any more. I just let the airplane go then because I was right down on the deck practically. And I hit a strand of small trees and bushes. And they took my impact away. And I didn't have a shoulder harness on, and I leaned forward when I hit the impact, or I hit the bushes, and some boxes and the suitcase flew over my head. I felt them go over and went through the windshield. Now, if I'd have had the shoulder harness on, I'd have been like this. I'd be here talking to you people without a head. That'd have been a good trick. So that's why every so often I think about my ghost airplane. Then the next one was December 23rd, 1910. Tim Gamoff used to fly for me. Captain Tim, right there. Ex-airline pilot. He flew for me, but he'll remember that I was flying an Aztec. And I had freight. Tim flew a lot of that for me too. And I was flying it. It was what they call a light twin. It had 500 horsepower. It was a nice, roomy airplane. Take the seats out. They carry a lot in it. December 23rd, I got a call. General Motors needed some parts up at Detroit, their assembly plant. And the weather is really terrible. And you don't tell General Motors you can't do it because they'll say, okay, if you won't do it, I'll find somebody crazier than you. Hey, traffic manager once told me that. I said, sir, there's nobody crazier than me. I have payroll to meet. So I'll take the flight. I go up there, and as I took off, made a right turn out of Akron, I heard a thump. I thought I hit a bird or something, but it kind of hit right up in the nose. So I thought, well, something happened to the nose wheel. So we'll go up, make the approach. I'm on the instrument approach into Detroit Metro Airport. And I go through what they call, I didn't even know this. I had a co-pilot with me, a guy that told me, watch for the runway lights. And I went through what I later determined was a supercooled cloud. Now, a supercooled cloud means that it's a cloud, but you've got moisture in it, and the latent heat of condensation. When moisture turns into ice, it has to give off heat, right? So here you got several clouds there, and I didn't know they were there. Nobody else knew they were there. The minute an object goes in and disturbs that balance they had, immediate ice forms. So I went into that, and then all of a sudden it was like a bomb went off. Wham! The ice, I was nothing but an ice cube then. And then I started losing the altitude. I had the engines full power, cowl flaps open there, heating up, and we're losing altitude like this. And I told the co-pilot, tighten up, we're going to go in. And then he said, I see lights. I took a quick glance, and I said, those are street lights. Next thing you know, there's a big flash. I said, oh, we hit something. And we never hit us, never hit up, but hit below down around the landing gear. So I cycled the landing gear. The landing gear was okay, except the nose gear. And my rudders were frozen because the nose gear was bent over. So I hit something with the nose gear. So I couldn't move the rudders. So I called the missed approach and said, geez, I got to go back to Akron. Well, I had the airport of Worcester also. I thought, well, I'll go in there and hide this airplane from the feds until we can find out what's wrong. Because you have an emergency, the paperwork is that high. So then I said, now I got this kid with me as co-pilot. If anything happens, the airport's deserted now, then, it'd be terrible on my conscience if we had a bad accident going in there. So I said, now I'll go back to Akron. Coming into Akron, I told the tower that, they still had the tower running at Akron Municipal Airport. I told the tower that, look, I'm coming in, I've got a bit of a problem. They said, do you want emergency? I said, no, just make sure I'm number one. So, okay, we'll make sure of that. Turn on the approach. Sure enough, that airport is lit up with red lights. They must have called everybody in Akron. They had red lights, ambulances, fire trucks. And I thought, well, I turned when I put the landing lights on, the landing light went out like this because it's mounted on the nose gear. So there it is, like, it's going to collapse when I land. So I landed on the left side of the runway in case it veered over. And we rolled to a stop, and I was puzzled. That landing gear's okay. So I got out. I'm under the airplane looking to see what I hit. And the fire chief comes up and says, hey, what happened to your tail? I said, well, what tail? I look, and that, of course, every time to tell the story, more is taken off, But really, this is the truth. That much of my tail was sliced off, like you just took a saw and just sliced it off. So I asked Tyler, I said, did I hit an airplane? He said, no, you're the only guy flying tonight so bad. I said, I don't know what I hit. He said, well, we do. You took out half the lights in southwest Detroit. So I went through the power lines.
Wow.
Woo! I still shiver when I think about that one. Then, 2 days later, I come into the office. I go into my desk, and there's what was left of my tail sitting on my desk. The wise guy pilots got that from the feds, and they put it on my desk. Then the inquiry started, the NTSB, the FAA, all the investigation. They claimed lightning hit me. This is December 23rd. No lightning, wasn't any thunderstorms. And the one Fed says, boy, you were one lucky guy. You were 34 feet off the ground. I says, how did you know? He says, because the line you hit was a really hot line. And you hit that, and he said, if you hadn't had a rubber de-icer boot on the tail, the vertical stabilizer, because that line went up, then over. Then another one sliced, well, they all cooperated in slicing the tail off. So he said, you'd have had an instant explosion. Whew. So now, on the approach, what happened on the ice, where I was starting to regain altitude, I got as low as 34 feet, but then all of a sudden, just like a clap of thunder, where the ice all broke off at one time. I've never heard or seen that. Just like somebody hit something encased in an ice cube with a hammer and everything broke off. Immediately the airplane started flying again because I was at full power. So I've got 2 ghost airplanes, and I don't know what happened. So it certainly wasn't pilot skill on either one of them. Well, thank you, folks. I'm sorry for the problems we had here.
Question? No, Bernie, I got a question.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever happened with your Lockheed?
My Lockheed, well, it was 1935 airplane. And Amelia Earhart, they were built on the same line. Mine was 2 serial numbers away from hers. Hers was a 10E, mine's a 12A. Mine was, for some reason, was 6 inches shorter than hers. Hers was, well, anyway, it's a whole story. I give a show on that. But anyway, what happened, I flew the airplane for many years. Great wonderful airplane. But then I couldn't get any parts for it. So finally, when the engines ran out, I parked it by the Goodrich hangar, took the engines off, left it there, and an American Airlines captain heard about it, came in, offered me $3,500 for the wreck, he said. Well, I took it. I said, well, this guy's nuts, paying $3,500 for that airplane. Little did I know. Then he and his son came in with a U-Haul with 2 engines. They hung the engine and they flew the airplane out. Well, about 3 years ago, I was leafing through Trade a Plane, the aviation Bible, and I saw a big picture of a Lockheed 12A for sale. I was afraid to look at the price. So I took a magnifying glass and looked at the tail number, 4278. I'll never forget my number. That was my airplane. Price $1.5 million. In my kitchen, I got a big hole in the wall where every so often I think about that, I beat my head in. Well, thank you, folks, for listening. It was a pleasure. I'm sorry again about I'm not the tech guy. This is all different, but give Ray credit. Give Ray a hand here. He's the guy who figured everything. He always figures everything out.